And as a farmer with mainly restaurant customers, I sort of saw, I think it was actually a Sunday that the announcement was made. And I normally get all of my orders from restaurants by a Sunday evening, and had sort of my 15 to 17 lined up. And when the announcement was made by the president that evening, they all just immediately got canceled by the Monday morning. And at the same time on Instagram, had seen a number of other farmers or farmers markets also posting about how basically within a matter of 12 hours, they had lost, the vast majority of their clientele or the ability to trade. And at the same time, I've got a little daughter, he's in school and happens to get lunch at school. And I realized that for us, it's a nice little luxury that she gets her food there, she has it with her friends, that sort of thing. But with a background in sort of work in public health and NGOs, also understanding that for other families, the lunch at school wasn't really just a luxury. It was actually one of the only meals perhaps that their children would be having. And so it was basically just sort of connecting these two immediate scenarios that were happening in my personal life, and thinking, okay, well, obviously there's going to be farmers like Mosa and myself that have crops to harvest and nowhere to send them. And then all these families that would be needing food. So how do we connect them?
And it's a fascinating model. It's really a fascinating model. So the idea to utilize the single donation to assist two parties, so the farmers who didn't have anyone to purchase the produce anymore, and those who, particularly during the lockdown, or would suffer with would need food. So I'm very interested in knowing this issue of tackling food insecurity and job security, and doing it in one. Where did most of the donations come from initially?
So definitely the vast majority of the donations were just from individuals. Ashley did an amazing job of setting up our website, and we've spoken with Web Tickets as just a sort of rough donation platform. And all of our marketing information was all via social media at first. And so it was just individuals who were logging on and buying these veg bags for people. I think one of the benefits that we had is that we moved quite quickly. So, people were able to donate. It was a week or two before lockdown actually happened. And I think it was Food Flow was one of the first ways that individual people could feel like they could make a difference somehow. So the vast majority, just individuals that wanted to be able to make a contribution and help other people that needed food.
So for those who are just joining us, I would just like to welcome you. My name is Ishay Govender, and we are chatting about the Food Flow model from the perspective of the founders, as well as a farmer and a distributing partner. Can I just ask that if you don't have your mics on mute and you are not a panelist, if you could just do that, and feel free to send us any questions in the chat box, and I'm sure we'll have some time to look at them and discuss them with you. What people may not all people may know, Iming, is that when you launched Food Flow, it was actually just prior to the official lockdown happening. And did you envision that happening?
Did I envision the lockdown happening? Or
in the manner in which it was going to happen?
I think we did, sort of following the patterns globally. And knowing that there was going to be a need. So one of the first people that I had spoken to and I had the idea was a friend who works in the Department of Education in the Western Cape, just to get a sense of what was happening within at least provincial government. How quickly were they going to react? What was the type of reaction that was going to happen? And sort of understood that within government and sort of budget realigning processes, that the fastest that they could possibly move was, within 2 weeks. And recognizing that, yes, there certainly would be an immediate short-term need from the farmer's perspective. And that also, compared globally to what was happening, that this was obviously going to be a relatively long-term effect and impact. Yeah.
So the reason that I mentioned that, Ashley and Iming, is as far as I know, you were one of the first. Sorry, let me just let someone in. You were one of the first initiatives that dealt with feeding communities on a large scale that we heard of, in terms of the media's perspective. Ashley, I've been curious about how big your team is, because there's certainly a fair amount of logistics that would be involved in running Food Flow. I wonder if you could share with us something about how you handle the communication, admin, logistics, the accounting as well. Considering, as far as I know, you're a team of 2.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the beautiful things about our model is that it is about working in partnership. So, you know, a lot of all the on the ground work is performed by our farmers and fisher partners, who then are connecting with the community distribution organizations. So that's enabled myself to kind of run the day-to-day operations. And then, of course, Iming, with all her connections into the food system community, has been pivotal in establishing those partnerships that have then, you know, enabled us to just place our orders every week and to make those connections between the farmers, fishers, and communities, so that then they can do what they're experts at doing as far as getting food to those that need it. So we've been really fortunate to have the financial management support of Oxfam South Africa. And then we've had some wonderful volunteers, including a woman, Marina, that's been with us since the 3rd week, who's given us a lot of time and energy of kind of thinking about our next steps forward, and working on some exciting communications videos that hopefully we'll have to share very soon. Yeah, so I've been quite lucky that, you know, during especially the first level of lockdown, even though I'm, you know, at home, I've still been able to work every day on what's happening out in the communities, thanks to our partners on the ground.
Yeah. So for those of you who are also just joining us, and you're catching up on what Food Flow does, it's an innovative model that uses a singular donation, mainly from the public, and uses this to support farmers by purchasing their produce and then supplying this produce to distributing partners who would take it on to initiatives that feed people in the community. So we look at a single donation that services 2 needs, I think needs that existed pre-COVID as well, which is something that we need to address, but became even more dire during the lockdown. Mhinti, could you please tell us a little bit about the Sakhisizwe project, and also about the food and the fish that you have been receiving from Food Flow? Ashley shared a statistic with me. I think as of the 9th of June, you had received about 63,702 Rand worth of produce.
Yeah. Well, Sakhisizwe is a youth development program. We are in Hout Bay, Imizamo Yethu. We've got plus minus 100 students in our database. So for us, as you said, when the lockdown started, we were worried about our students, because when they come from school, they come to us. So we also give them something to eat, because we know that, you know, sometimes when they come off school, they are already hungry. So we realized that, hey, what's going to happen to our students when they're at home? You know, so that's when Ashley and Iming approach us and say they've got this wonderful opportunity. So for us, I think it has been working very well in terms of not only taking care of our students, but now we are taking care of the whole family. And I think the model is amazing. The fact that they are assisting the farmers, in the same time, they're also assisting the vulnerable communities. I mean, for me, that is just a blown away strategy in terms of supporting, you know, 2 things at the same time. So it's been working very well. We are so grateful to the help that we are receiving from Food Flow, and we are grateful to the farmers that are being helped and assisted during this time. You know, it's really not easy to start something, and then when crisis comes, and then that thing collapses. So this is just a strategy that is there to make sure that everything stays sustainable through this whole time. So yeah, for me, it's just amazing. I'm just blown away. Yeah.
Mhinti, could you share a little bit more about what Sakhisizwe does? So as it is directly linked to Food Flow, you're utilizing the food that they produce, but what are the other services that you provide to the youth in your community?
Yeah, for us as Sakhisizwe, we are providing an academic support. where our students come and we make sure that we support them with their math studies, reading. We also do recycling for our community just to make sure that it stays clean, and we give an awareness to our community how they can recycle. We also do spiritual things whereby we encourage our young people that even though there's education and everything else, but also there's an upper power that kids needs to connect with their spiritual life. And also we do, creativity through art, dance, and music. But besides that, also we also offer a community support whereby we go to their homes and check what is the situation. So we also build our community side of things as well. And I'm also involved in just making sure we connect with other NGOs and also other leaders that are doing great things in the community. So basically we're an after school program. We also have a sport program where we encourage our students to stay healthy through running, through swimming, through soccer and netball. So we've tried to design a holistic program that was going to be suitable for the young people, program that they've requested that they needed to do. Yeah. So that's what we do in an everyday life.
And so considering that the need is so great amongst so many communities across South Africa, I'm also interested to know, were you able to secure any assistance, any other assistance, perhaps from the government or one of the funds that were made available?
For us, because we are an NGO that is new, we've been existing for 3 years, we just knew that we are not the bigger organization that will get great influence in terms of receiving the funds. So one of our strategies at Sakhisizwe is working in partnership with the bigger organizations. So for us, partnership is one of the key that has driven us forward. So for me, I just knew that there will be 1 or 2 partners who might tap into the relief fund, and they'll think of Sakhisizwe as a small organization that is in the township. So for me, I just knew I won't even try, because I don't think I'm in that position of, receiving that much. I know there's bigger organizations who could go for it, but we are just grateful that the partners that we have, with whatever amount that they receive, they know that there's another small organization in the township of Imizamo Yethu that we've been working with. Why not share what we have? So same with Food Flow, they know us. Actually, we've done a lot of things together. So I'm sure once this came, also Sakhisizwe was in the midst of, the partners that they were willing to work with. So for us, we knew that the only thing for us to move forward was to build great partnership around the NGOs or the businesses that are already doing great things. Yeah.
So one of the things I think that we're noticing more and more, particularly around the issue of food insecurity, and obviously that isn't the only issue, the ongoing about mental, emotional, and physical needs of young people and all people, will continue during this pandemic, and possibly be even more difficult to cater towards. But one of the things we are noticing is the community-based initiatives and initiatives from individuals that are coming forward and carrying so many of our people through these times. So now that we are on level 3 of the lockdown, and I know that people are suffering from donor fatigue, and for many people who have not been able to get back to work, the effect after these many months has been crushing. And so in relying on the public to continually fund, it becomes taxing, and I suppose both on your hope and on their pockets. But Ashley, I'm curious to know, when we take this into account, and we're dealing with limited incomes as well, where does Food Flow see itself pivoting in the very near future?
Yeah, so that's definitely something that we're grappling with right now. Is we were very fortunate to have an outpouring of support early on, and that enabled us to scale across the country and support more farmers and food producers, as well as more communities. So right now we are we've seen a significant dip kind of every time the level of lockdown goes down, so to donations. And unfortunately, the need is just as great as ever. So we are, wanting to reach out to larger foundations and larger corporates that might still have some funding available, although we are finding that many of them have also, emptied out their pockets as far as what they had available. But in the kind of medium term, we were really lucky to be selected by the Oribi Village incubator to start having additional support in thinking of what a more sustainable business model for food flow could be. So we have been hearing from our food producer partners that there is a need beyond this immediate relief for additional support. And so trying to ensure that, just as Mhinti mentioned, the challenge of being a small organization, when it comes to food relief, we are a tiny player in a very large pool of organizations, that have, 5 million Rand budget, whereas we've been very lucky to fundraise just about 1.5 million Rand. And so I think that's an ongoing conversation, reaching out to other organizations, other experts in the food space, to ensure that, whatever food flow starts pivoting towards is filling a gap, that we're not, kind of recreating the many organizations that are working in this space. But I do think we've tapped into a unique a need in that, we really have a vision of making it economically viable for small scale food producers to feed their local communities. So, we're very passionate about, figuring out how we can continue and sustain these relationships that we've established. I think Mosa Hope is a great example of, a farmer in her community that now is, her and 3 other farmers there in Limpopo are every week putting together their harvests to deliver to one organization locally that then is distributing across multiple villages. And if we can figure out a way to sustain that relationship so that it's economically viable, it works as a business, but it's also getting food to those that need it most. So it's a work in progress. We're, as an organization, only about 3 months old, and every week has been a pivot of some kind. And we're, thanks to the energy of our partners, we're excited to keep it moving and keep the pivot going.
So actually, yeah, pivot seems to be the word of the moment, doesn't it? And all of us have to. I mean, it's really a case of, I suppose, in many instances, adapt or die as well. And I do believe that sometimes some of the most interesting and perhaps even long-term solutions happen when people are able to reimagine the future. And it obviously comes with a great deal of complexity as well, and difficulty. And speaking of which, I would like to know, Iming or Ashley, you could perhaps weigh in here. I've heard about some of the challenges. Okay, so the obvious one being funding. What have been some of the other challenges that people on the outside may not be aware of when it comes to running an enterprise like this? So are we calling you an NPO or an almost NPO, or are we calling you a social enterprise? Sorry, there were 2 questions there.
I think we'll be heading in the social enterprise direction.
Okay. And if you could, sorry, I want to hear about the challenges as well, but could you help us to understand what is a social enterprise versus an NGO or an NPO?
Yeah, so a social enterprise functions as a business as far as aiming to be as sustainable as possible. That may include, grant funding from foundations and other types of kind of more traditional NPO funding. But it involves, establishing a business model that does have some source of sustainable income. However, the focus is not on making a profit. So it still has a focus on a social aim, in our case, supporting small scale food producers and getting food out into communities. So that would remain the focus, but just realizing that, relying on individual donors, as well as becoming, yet another kind of NPO in a very crowded space, may not be are the most effective way of making as large an impact as possible. So that's kind of the impetus of becoming a social enterprise.
Okay, and my understanding is then with you and Iming and everyone else involved in the background, you see there's a longevity to the food flow program. You see it going forward and perhaps transforming along the way, but you have a desire to have this food flow continue and do the work that it's doing for a while.
Yeah, we definitely hope to be able to find a model that enables us to do so. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so the reason I asked that question is because there have been interim relief, things that have been created in the interim, and considering the success that you have enjoyed and how novel the concept is, I'm very curious to know if you see this going forward. And I had started tackling the other challenges, but I want to hear about those, Iming, but also about some of the unexpected successes that you may have enjoyed during these few months.
Yeah. Should we start with the challenges or the successes?
Yeah. It's always good to start with the negative first, or the difficulties first, right? And good positive.
It was actually interesting to sort of think back and think, I mean, the two, and Ashley can definitely add in here. To me, there was one that's just a simple sort of operational challenge initially, and then the other was sort of a larger, the dynamics of the food aid space, I would say, which was quite interesting and enlightening to me as the standout challenges. So when we initially launched Food Flow, we wanted to do it in partnership with whatever government was going to do. We wanted it to be able to not sort of, double up on work. And so we had a contact into the Department of Social Development in the Western Cape, and they've been really great at communicating. We're very, very welcoming. And sort of highlighted certain organizations that were doing soup kitchen type work or distributing food already that they knew, even in their normal budget in a normal year, weren't reaching the amount of people that they knew were in need of food aid. And one of their requests, which didn't really match how we originally thought of it, was that we actually rotate through organizations because they wanted the spread of food to seem to be a bit more equitably distributed. Mm-hmm. And so we were honoring that request. It just made it very difficult, or made it more difficult to arrange the logistics, because basically every single week Ashley was sort of coordinating new partnerships between a farmer and an organization, and how just different simple things like pickup and who was the contact and that sort of thing. And so there was just a lot of time that was spent doing that. And then after a few weeks, we just sort of realized that both in order to create a more lasting relationship between a farmer and a distribution organization, and just a greater sense of continuity of the food that could be provided, was to actually set more of a permanent sort of partnership between farmer and organization. So that was sort of a simple logistical challenge, but it actually sort of adds up to a lot of time. Mm-hmm. I'd say for me, something that was quite interesting was that, early on, well, and still a bit now, we had been in communication with a few corporates, whether people who organize or companies that wanted to support food aid or were interested in ways they could partner. And I think a common thing that came out was, as Mhinti and Mosa both pointed out, like either we partner with smaller farmers and smaller organizations. And it's very important to us, like the foundation was about supporting food producers who were losing their livelihoods in these sort of initially restaurant, but, like as Mosa pointed out, also the sort of informal traders. And we felt quite strongly that a lot of the larger farmers still had their supermarket customers. And, people were still buying food, which is one of the sort of lucky aspects of being a farmer, is people are still needing food. But we're very focused on supporting those smaller scale producers. And by definition, right now it means that there's a smaller amount of product from each grower. The range is perhaps different because it needs to make sense for a small scale farmer to grow. And then the reach is perhaps not as far as a giant food aid organization with a multi-million rand budget donating 100-kilogram sacks of SAMP into a community. Also, of course, that our goods were perishable as well. And so it seemed like a common trend was either a corporate that had its own food aid program and was trying to see how we could fit into that, or corporates who were looking for higher numbers of impact in terms of just simply raw numbers fed or simple logistics. How can I donate 5,000 loaves of bread once off or something like that? And so I think some of the challenges was trying to understand how and if that we were the right partner for some of those corporates. I don't know if Ashley, you've got other sort of challenges that stood out for you.
Yeah, I think it's been an interesting journey as far as the metrics. It seems like kind of every organization, when sharing their impact, has a different way of measuring exactly what that means. And it's been difficult for us because being so impact focused, it's been, we want to be as transparent as possible, which means maybe our numbers are a bit smaller when actually our impact is quite deep, because we have the impact upstream with the small scale, producers supporting their livelihood, which are enabling them to, continue to keep their staff employed, continue to, pay school fees, continue to, do everything that their business enables them to do, while at the same time then, enabling families to have a harvest bag that provides vegetables for a week. So that's something that we've continued to try to figure out how to best articulate and share our impact story, because it is more complex and hopefully a bit richer than as simple as 10,000 people have a million mouths been fed. We're really about building relationships, both with the food producers and enabling people to really understand who their food came from and where it came from and how it was produced, as well as, making sure that the partners that we work with in the communities are also feeling empowered, that we trust them to get the food to those that are most in need, and that they're the experts in their own community as well.
It's very interesting that you said one of your priorities is for people to understand who their food comes from. You often hear stories or you hear an emphasis on where does the food come from. And I think the who is an essential part in the equation that's missing. And speaking of the who, Mosa, I thought perhaps you could give us, from a small scale farming perspective, I know we spoke about some of this previously, but some of the concerns that you have going forward and that you perhaps had even before the pandemic, because I think obviously one can't expect that food flow will continue to meet and address all of your needs in the long and short term. Have we lost you in video, Mosa?
No, I'm still here.
Okay, wonderful.
So the first concern was in regards with the communities, what will happen after the food flow program ends, and especially to the no-income families, and what will they eat? So I was speaking to Moileji, the lady who introduced me to food flow, and so we were speaking on terms of how about we educate such families on planting for themselves, having small gardens for the vegetable gardens to sustain themselves. And also because we know in rural areas we have a challenge with the water crisis, and that's when I said I'm thinking that we should also do hydroponics for families which don't have enough water, so that they can sustain themselves, get adequate vegetables for themselves. And on the other side, it was okay to also organically teach them on how to plant the vegetables, because it's an issue on buying resources to get your seeds until up to the harvest stages. And the other issue with us is because of we noticed that COVID-19 hit us so hard, and food security will be an issue, and food prices will also increase. So we're also thinking that because of now we're operating in a 1 hectare land, we should also expand with the money, with the support that we got from Food Flow, from 1 hectare at least to 2 hectares, that also the community gets to have food for themselves, which is enough and which is also affordable.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think these are ongoing challenges, aren't they? Because not to state the obvious, but farming is difficult, and small-scale farming in the manner in which you want to do it is not easy. What I also find really interesting is one of your goals is to encourage young people to farm, and I thought maybe you could just touch on that briefly for us. Why you're so passionate about that?
About farming.
Yes, but encouraging young people to join you.
So this farming is such an interesting career that one can venture into, and there's so much. So every day people get to eat every day, and when you help out the community, like you can make your own income out of that, and according to the yield, according to how you maintain your farm, it's people. So there's so much socioeconomic factors that's going on, especially with illnesses, poverty. So when we get into farming, you're combating all the socioeconomic factors that you are faced with.
Okay.
And also the risk of job unemployment. There's so much land that we can use, so we can actually eradicate the issue of being unemployed.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Mhinti, I'm interested to know, can you see a project like Food Flow working with you over a longer term? And what are some of the ongoing needs of your community?
Yes, definitely. I see Food Flow working with us, if that could be a possibility in a longer term. I think for me, number one, I just love the fact that it's, empowerment or development is an ongoing thing. It doesn't end, So when you empower, you need to look on the continuous thing. So I think for us as an organization, obviously, people who are in disadvantaged communities, they lack the basic need, which is food and shelter and just normal stuff. So food will always be a priority. If we also saw when people were told that there's going to be a lockdown, everyone just rushed into shops trying to get food. And they were saying that Corona must come to my house being full. I don't want to die starving. So food is the number one need that everyone wants. It brings comfort when you are stressed, when you have a plate that is warm with food, people get, they are able to dream, they are able to think outside the box. So when we address food, we are addressing one of the first priorities that people need, which is it's a need. It's not even a want, it's the need that a human being needs. So for us to see farmers, I think that will be, you ask a question to Mosa, how will you encourage young people to be involved in farming? I mean, it starts from there, whereby there were these farmers that were felt stranded during this COVID-19, and there were people who were able to say, hey, why don't we partner up the farmer and the organizations? That's the education out there. When you start saying, these are the people that gives you food, someone says, I think that was Ashley who said, people need to know who are the people that are giving them food. That's education right there that young people can just grab into in terms of where does the food come from? How do you make food? And one of my passion is also is farming. So I think education is very important. It starts right there, as we give them the food and they know how does this come about. I think for me, that would be one thing that I would love to the information that I would love to share with with our youth. So yeah, on a long process, I mean, there's a huge possibility that we need this great initiative to even go on after the COVID-19 as well. Yeah.
And to grow. And Mhinti, if you could, if you don't mind, for anyone else listening who may be able to assist you or may know of somebody who has a contact who could. What are some of the other needs, apart from funding, that your project requires? Are there any immediate needs, physical needs?
Definitely. I think at this time, I know that people think that it's just the time that we are in homes, but people are working tirelessly while they're in their homes. I think on our side, it would be just this small stuff, just someone with an HR background that could put together some of our policies that we want to put in place. We need someone with that skill, and also just someone who could also advise us in terms of improving some of our admin stuff. I know there's a lot of people with different skills. If anyone would like to involve in terms of marketing, in terms of social platforms, things that we can improve, and even with our academics, we want to have our own curriculum that is in place. If someone's got a love of writing, they want to come up with better ways for that, we could, even with this thing that we're talking about in terms of introducing farming to the young people. I mean, for us, we're very open to new programs. Even now we are starting 2 programs. We want to be, as the tourism business, we know that there's people who have also started things in that sector. Now things are still, we want to see how we can tap into that. So for us, we're very open to new programs as things arises. So if you have a love for HR and you want to assist an NGO to put things together when it comes to policies, when it comes to contracts, I mean, we are open to people with skills who have time, who can give it away. So yeah, that would be grateful for us.
Well, thank you for that, Mhinti. In a few minutes, I think what I'll do is I'll just invite everybody to share the details. I must apologize, as a one-woman show, I'm not executing things with drop downs and with backgrounds with all the social media details. So if we could share that in a little while, that would be great. And we all know that until there is a vaccine, that we are going to have to contend with living in the way we have become accustomed to for a while still. So social distancing and just being fastidious about hygiene. Ashley, I was wondering what's the specific role that you envision for nonprofits and social enterprises involved with both farmers and feeding communities going forward?
Yeah, I think that, from our initial launch, there was always a sense that small scale producers have a role to play in these value chains. So that's why, Iming initially reached out to the Western Cape Department of Social Development, as well as the Western Cape Department of Education, to find out, with the existing school feeding schemes no longer operating at the time, where were those budgets going to be reallocated? But even moving forward, there is an opportunity for community feeding schemes that do have funding to think about where their food's coming from, who the food's coming from, and tap into this wonderful network of small scale producers that we've been partnering with, and procure through them, because they are able to, provide fresh, nutritious food, which is exactly what's needed. And if you can keep that money local, as well as, shortening the supply chain, then it has both, financial benefit, social benefit, and environmental benefit. So it's something that we would love to see continuing moving forward. I know Mhinti works with a wonderful woman, Mama Miriam, that does the cooking at her organization normally. And I know Iming's farm often donates their seconds to Mama Miriam's kitchen. And if we can, find more of those links that, enable not only a donation relationship, but potentially also where budget allows for that to be a sustainable income source as well, then that's all the better.
And specifically within food flow, do you see yourself growing and expanding, or how do you feel about offshoot models based on yours, working either not in competition with you, but working in collaboration with you? Do you see that happening, or would you prefer that you're like an umbrella body and you assist various similar or initiatives within one space?
Yeah, I think we're definitely on a learning journey right now as far as, connecting with the existing organizations in the space, and kind of figuring out where our unique skill set can be of use moving forward. I think, one of the benefits of us being kind of on a smaller scale, both in terms of the producers we're working with, but also the community organizations that we're connecting to, is, we have been able to quickly scale across the country by building those partnerships. And so I think there's great geographical potential as far as how we can scale. And so I think, that's a wonderful avenue to explore if given the opportunity. But yeah, I think we're open to partnership. We're really not wanting to kind of reinvent what other organizations are doing that have been in the space for years. So yeah, continuing the conversations, continuing the learnings, and really making sure that our unique attributes are something of value and that can create as rich an impact as possible.
Thank you. We are getting a few comments on the chat. I just want to encourage you that if you have anything that you would like to ask in specific to any one of our panelists about their perspective, or maybe share your own, please do, and I will get to them very shortly. So Iming, for those who don't know, your core business is as a farmer. And we don't see restaurants opening anytime soon, and certainly not at the level and the scale in which they were opened before. So I'm very curious to know what you think about the future of the kind of farming that you were doing.
Yeah, so it is quite sad to not see them realistically opening anytime soon.
I'm going to interrupt quickly. Maybe just tell people what it is you grow, who your team is, and who you supply. And
sure. So yeah, again, we're farming in Hout Bay. We're a small team. We basically add up to 2.5 full-time people, but it's actually about 4 of us on the team. So, well, all of us local to Hout Bay. And we are a 3-year-old farm. We were farming on about 2,000 square meters of bed space. Pre-COVID, we were already planning on expanding. So we are actually going to be growing in the future on about 3,500 square meters. And yeah, so I made the decision 3 years ago. For me, it was very important to show that small-scale farming in an ecologically and socially responsible way could be financially viable as a business. And just understanding the sort of local food scene in Cape Town, thought that one of the best ways to do that was to work with the high-end restaurant market. The conversations I'd had with chefs were wonderful. They were really motivated to buy in season, very interested in some of the more exclusive crops, and we're quite willing to pay prices that were realistic for supporting good wages and good farming practices. So this last season, we grew over 50 different crops, over 100 varieties of them. So everything from sort of more exotic herbs, like Vietnamese coriander and 4 different kinds of shiso, to 18 different varieties of tomatoes, tomatillos, 4 different varieties of eggplants. Currently, we're still harvesting salsify and parsley root, and Jerusalem artichoke, and some stranger other root crops right now as well. Yeah, so that's Muse Farm, basically. And so we're very highly dependent on the restaurant market. And like I said, for me, one of the things I've loved about working with the chefs is that the prices that they're willing to pay or able to pay, because they put such a good value add onto it for the whole experience of eating great food in a restaurant, are significantly better than what I would get if I sold into a normal supermarket chain, or even a farmer's market, or even most of the veg box schemes. So I think for a farm like ours, Oh, and the other part is that it's for not very much logistical work. The restaurants do a lot of volume. So you're bringing in the equivalent of probably to some of our better customers, as if we were selling 200 to 300 veg bags a week to like one customer. So it's one delivery, there's no packaging, one weighing, it's one washing. I sort of recently said in a post, like up to 100 times less work for 10 times the profit margin. So I think the challenge for us and for other small scale farms is, there has been interest and demand in getting food from local small farms, which is wonderful. And I think that there are options. The thing is just balancing sort of how much labor time we have and how much less we're actually earning when we're selling through those chains. And I'm not sure it's something that the regular consumer is actually aware of, is just, just how bad the prices are when you sell through a lot of the other normal chains. It's a balance. It's also a crop choice selection, obviously, for us personally. Some of the more obscure crops are harder for the household to use. But I think, on the positive side, like Ashley mentioned, people are interested in buying local, and I think people understand it, sort of appreciating food, yes, as a necessity, but also the various other aspects that food brings us. And I think for the farmer, it's about understanding like what is the service we provide, and then also given the new context of things, how do we provide it in a way that is appealing to the consumer, while also not being a huge burden on the farm as well.
I think it's going to be a very, we abuse the word interesting, don't we? But it's going to bring its own challenges, this little period that, immediate period that follows, about how we navigate. I can't foresee things really going back to exactly the way they were. Maybe of course, whether you are supplying vegetables to appear on a restaurant menu in the restaurant or in delivery doesn't quite affect you perhaps, but it does, because I think the scale will be different as well, and the sort of
it definitely does. And I think also just I've already seen it for the restaurants, their costs are going up significantly to do home delivery, and so the amount of their budget that they have for the food spend has gone down. So chefs and restaurants that I know who normally would be buying a vast majority of their produce from us, they need to look elsewhere, because all of a sudden they're incurring delivery costs at the same time as some rent, at the same time as other marketing, and they're taking on the inefficiencies of household deliveries. What used to be perhaps 40% of each plate cost going to the ingredients is now possibly, I'm not sure, but possibly down to 10 to 15%.
I think it also affects the kind of produce that they will be able to, and they are serving, because there's a real difference between plating up fresh with something very delicate in the restaurant, where they can guarantee it's hot and perfect and for the next 5 minutes will stay in shape, versus what can go out in a delivery box as well. So there was a little conversation happening on the chat box between Calvin Michaela, who was a farmer based in Soweto and is now studying at the University of Gastronomic Sciences in Palenzo. And he had asked, I'm just going to read it so others can also partake. He said, Mosa, what are some of the challenges you encountered in the response from the young people that you reached? Any positive feedback? And then Mosa responded that farming is not popular amongst the youngsters. When I first started, I didn't get much support, as I thought, from them. They hung around me out of curiosity. When my vision unfolded and they saw my passion, they started growing interest. I have young aspiring farmers I'm currently mentoring. I have volunteers who are eager to explore the agricultural sector. The farming network is positively growing. On that note, I would just like to invite everybody to verbally share your contact details of where we can find you and how we can support you. Perhaps, Iming, you would go ahead for Food Flow and News Farm.
Sure. I'll go ahead for Muse Farm. Ashley can do food flow. So for Muse Farm on Instagram, we're at MEUSEFARM. And the website is musefarm.com. We do exist on Facebook, but I'm very unresponsive there. So yeah, best information sources are those first two.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Mosa?
Okay, I'm on Facebook. I am Mosa Hope Mapheto. Also on WhatsApp on 071 2259 206.
Okay. And Mhinti?
We are on Facebook as Sakhisizwe YDP. We also Instagram as Sakhisizwe. And also you can get hold of us via phone or WhatsApp on 079 2520150. And our website is www.sakhisizwe.com.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, Ashley.
So Food Flow is on Instagram and Facebook at FoodFlowZA, and our website is foodflowza.com.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for participating today. It's been fascinating to learn more about the food flow model and some of the partners whom you benefit and work with directly. On behalf of SA POC at the table, thanks for joining our Zoom chat, and please have a look at our very, very young YouTube channel, SA POC at the table, where we will be sharing recordings of these conversations, and we look forward to chatting to more people within our community who are doing work, interesting work, during these very difficult times. So thanks so much to everyone for joining, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.